Hello again, it's my Soon, and we've been one day delayed for the video of the electrolyte that I taught in my live the other night. So now I'm trying this program. Hopefully it works. You cannot see me, but I hope my voice is clearer. So remember I told you I'm gonna try we don't need to know every single electrolyte reflection or how it works in our body system, but we need to know the basic that we need in the nclex, and those I put in one formula. And now, even though I explain it manually, here I'm gonna explain it with illustration, so maybe that's gonna help more. Um, it's not a new formula, it's just a way for me to memorize it, and I just name it Laejth. Um, just because if you Google that name, you will never see a definition for that, and that's the name of my son with a silent J. Okay, so I want you to memorize call 911, and I think that is something easy to remember. In any world, whenever you want to call emergency, it's call 911, and it's actually from one of my friends as well. So call 911, it actually reflect calcium. So Ca, it's calcium. 911 is the average. I know it's 9 to 10.5, some books is 9 to 10.8, but the easier way to remember it, especially in the test about the lab values, is call 911. So at least you know is that the range of the normal. So if it's below 9, it's hypocalcemia. If it's above 11, it's hypercalcemia. So that's an easy way to remember it, right? Call 911. Now, because this is really easy to remember, call 911, we're going to try to build up the formula in relation to all the other electrolytes we need around the calcium. So this is all you're gonna have in notes at the end of this lecture. So at the end of this lecture, you're gonna result in including or reflecting everything on this page, which is calcium. It's opposite of potassium is okay, and okay in volume, calcium, magnesium, and then OMG or opposite of magnesium. You're gonna tell me what the hell is this? I'm gonna try to break it down so that at the end of this lecture, this figure will be so easy for you. It'll be so familiar. So let's start with potassium and calcium. So we're gonna start talk about this relationship. So before we talk about the relationship, let's see about calcium and the reflect on the symptoms of the body. So calcium, it's the opposite of the symptoms. Everything. So if you have hypocalcemia, you expect all the symptoms to be fast, to be up, to be high. So if you have a patient with hypocalcemia, you expect the patients will have seizure or coma. So you're gonna think which is faster or which is higher, seizure, where you have shaking and everything of the muscles, or coma, where there's lazy and sleepy. So you said, oh, it's seizure, right? Because it's the opposite. And if you have high calcium, it's the opposite. So the symptoms will go down. So do you need to memorize all the signs and symptoms? No. So all you have to know is whenever you have hypocalcemia, everything goes up. Like hypocalcemia, you can have tetany. Hypocalcemia, you're gonna have the everything like goes up, tachycardia, increase urine output, everything goes the opposite of calcium. So so now we know calcium is called 911, and calcium everything goes the opposite in the symptoms. Let's go the relationship with the potassium. Let's read this out loud. Calcium symptoms, it means the how it reflects with the symptoms, right? As we discussed a while ago, if calcium goes up, the symptoms goes down, right? So calcium symptoms I'll try to cover this up first. Calcium symptoms is opposite of potassium symptoms. So what does that mean? So calcium symptoms, opposite of potassium symptoms. So if calcium goes up and the symptoms goes down, we said it's the opposite in the potassium. So it means in the potassium, if the potassium goes up, the symptoms goes up. So if you have hypercalcemia, you will have coma because the symptoms will go down. But if you have hyperkalemia, which is high potassium, you will expect the patient will have seizure because the symptoms also goes up. The only thing in potassium, so whenever it goes up, the symptoms goes up. Whenever it goes down, the symptoms will goes down. And because potassium is such a special electrolyte to the heart, really affect the heart and everything, so it have to be a special. In order to treat it in a special way, we have to keep it exception. So the only two exception we have is the urine output and the heart rate. It's really hard to write in this slide, but I'm gonna try my best. There you go. So what does that mean? If potassium goes up, the symptoms goes up, except the urine output will go down, so we're going to have oliguria, and the heart rate will go down. That's the only two exceptions, just to make the potassium special. You know, K stands for king, and king always have to have a special treatment. So if the potassium goes down, the symptoms will goes down, and of course the same exception, so except the urine output, oh that's better, and heart rate. So it's gonna go the opposite, so it's gonna go heavy up. Okay, so again, calcium goes up, the symptoms goes down. However, the calcium symptoms is the opposite of the potassium symptoms. So whenever potassium goes up, the symptoms goes up. And because K stands for king, so we have to have a special treatment, we have exception. Except the urine output goes down and the heart rate goes down, it's the opposite. So whenever potassium goes down, all the symptoms will go down. So if you have hypokalemia, you will expect to have coma. You will expect to have constipation because it's a downer, right? It goes down. It's a slow. You will expect to have weight gain, except for the urine output. You'll have polyuria because it's increased, and the heart rate tachycardia. But everything else is the same. And then now let's go with the other word, which is the value. So we'll cover this now. So calcium value opposite potassium value. Let me read that again. Calcium value is the opposite of potassium value. What do I mean by that? So in the blood, the potassium amount in the blood is the opposite of calcium. So if you have hypocalcemia, you will expect the patient to have what? Hyperkalemia. So in the test, in the NCLEX, if you have opened the exhibit and you see the one of the lab diagnostic is potassium, let's say 6.1 or 5.8, you know that's hyperkalemia, right? So we have to look also the indirect information they're going to give to us. So what else? So don't just expect NCLEX is going to give you all the direct questions because that's the easy part. So I'm talking about the medium and the hard levels. So from that specific information, because you have hyperkalemia, you expect the patient to have what? So you may have multiple choice. You will expect him to have high calcium, high magnesium, high sodium, or low calcium. So it's going to be low calcium because high potassium value in the blood is the opposite of calcium value in the blood. Let's try to put it in the scenarios or to give it examples so it's going to be more easier. Let's talk about renal failure. In renal failure, potassium is high, right? Because it cannot be excreted. If you check the lab diagnostic, you will see he have hypocalcemia. But in the test or in the reviews that if you had first review or other type reviews, how they will connect the dots with you. They're going to tell you, oh, in renal failure, potassium cannot be excreted. Thus, we're going to have high potassium in the blood. We're going to have hyperkalemia. And also, the kidney cannot filter all the waste or cannot filter everything out or the electrolyte balance. So it will retain phosphorus. And then the phosphorus is the opposite of calcium. So if phosphorus is retained, we're going to have hypocalcemia. So they're going to connect the dots, but yada, 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 it's a very long thing. I'm going to try to shorten that yada, yada, yada. Just easy is that potassium value is the opposite of calcium. So in renal failure, because potassium cannot be excreted, we're going to have high calcium in the blood. So we expect the patient to have hypocalcemia. Do we need to know why or how? No. We only need to know how it reflects. Let's see another example. Cushing. Cushing is because of increased steroids, right? The side effects of steroids is the same thing. So what happens whenever we have aldosterone or increased steroids? We retain sodium and water. And the other effect, because we retain sodium and water, the potassium will be excreted. So we're going to have high potassium or hypokalemia. And then as I said, it's going to be the opposite. So expect the patient to have what? Hypercalcium. And then let me try to prove it to you. Isn't it Cushing syndrome or Cushing patients have fragile bones? Or they said, oh, whenever you have steroids, you're going to have fragile bones. It's going to be easily fractured. Why? Because the calcium will be shifting from the bones to the blood. So this is the blood. So in steroids or in Cushing syndromes, the calcium is shifting from the bones to the blood. So you're gonna have high calcium in the blood. That's why they said, oh, they can develop easily fractured bones. That's the one of side effects of the steroids or Cushing. So that's a long story how it connected. Let's get to the short way. It's the opposite. So whenever you have low potassium, you have high calcium. And we just proved that in two samples, renal failure and Cushing. So if we want to conclude it with potassium and the calcium, it's the opposite, whether it's the symptoms or the value. So let's read this out loud. So calcium symptoms, or the reflection of the symptoms on the calcium, or the calcium value in the blood, is the opposite of potassium symptoms and value. So calcium, whenever it goes up, symptoms goes down, and potassium, whenever it goes up, the symptoms goes up, except the urine output and heart rate. And the calcium value or the amount in the blood is the opposite of calcium. So if we have hypercalcemia, we have hyperkalemia. So that's with potassium. Now let's relate call 911 or calcium to magnesium. So we just said this a while ago. This is the repetition. So calcium symptoms. So whenever the calcium goes down, the symptoms goes up. And whenever the potassium goes down, the symptoms goes down. Of course, the exception, remember King K, is urine output and heart rate. Always draw the arrows, and remember in the test, before you click start, you put some notes on the top of the paper they give you. So try to put that arrows. It's going to help a lot, and select all the apply. Let's go now with magnesium. Calcium symptoms, I'm talking about symptoms, not value, equals magnesium symptoms. So we said if low calcium, the symptoms will go high. So if you have hypocalcemia, you will have seizure. Or if you have hypocalcemia, you will have tachycardia, goes up. So we said calcium symptoms equals magnesium symptoms. So the same way it goes as calcium, the same way it goes for magnesium. So whenever you have magnesium is low, the symptoms goes up. So if you have hypomagnesemia, you expect the patient will have tachycardia or as well seizure. It's the same as calcium in only symptoms. How about the value, like we talked about a while ago in potassium? Are they the same? Calcium number in the blood, or the value, is the opposite of magnesium. So if you have hypocalcemia, expect the patients to have hypermagnesemia. So if you have low calcium in the blood, so if you have, for instance, the calcium is 8, which is low, expect the magnesium to be high, 3. Just an example. This one, it's the symptoms. Here is the value. So if patient is hypercalcemia, expect him to be hypomagnesemia. If patient is hypermagnesemia, which is high in magnesium, expect to have low in calcium in the blood. So why do we need to know about this? For treatment. So when patient has hypermagnesemia, let's try to draw the arrow. It's high in magnesium. So what do you expect the doctor will order? And that's one of the questions in nclex. You'll say, oh, it's high in magnesium, so we have to give him calcium. If you give him calcium, it's going to go down. So expect the doctor to order what? Calcium gluconate. Why? Because it's the opposite. So if we give them calcium, so if we're going to give the patient calcium, what's going to happen with the magnesium? It's going to go down. Okay? So if we try to summarize the magnesium and calcium relationship, in the lab value in the blood, it goes the opposite way. So if calcium goes up, magnesium goes down. If magnesium goes up, calcium goes down. However, their reflection on the symptoms is the same. So if you have hypercalcemia, which is high calcium, the symptoms will go down, so expect the patient will have coma. The same way as magnesium. If you have hypermagnesium, the symptoms will also go down, so expect the patient will have coma. So now let's look at this. So now you will see this more easier. So if we're talking about symptoms, the relationship about calcium to potassium is opposite. O stands for opposite. So calcium, okay. Okay. So opposite of potassium. What does that mean? Because we said if calcium goes up, the symptoms goes down. Right? So we said it's the O stands for opposite, K for potassium. So it's okay. So it's the opposite. So here you write it, if potassium goes up, the symptoms goes up. Of course, there is the 2 exception. The urine output and the heart rate. How about the symptoms in magnesium? It's equals magnesium. So we said here, calcium goes up, the signs and symptoms goes down. So equals, it means the same. So the same, so we just repeat the sentence. So if we have magnesium goes up, so we just copy paste it. See? And then with this arrow goes down, so the symptoms will go down. It's the same effect of the calcium. How about the value in the blood? Because a lot of people get confused between these two. So that's why I try to separate it. Value. Calcium and potassium is OK. See, OK. O stands for opposite. K is potassium. So what does that mean? So it means in the blood, if you have high calcium, you're going to have low potassium. So if you have calcium value of 12 or 13, will you expect the patient to have VTAC or VFib? I'll repeat it. If you have a patient with calcium of 13, so you have high calcium, right? I'll write it down here. Will you expect the patient to have VTAC or VFib? And that's how they ask in nclex. It's all in that. They're not going to ask you, oh, what do you expect in potassium? Because we already know the relationship. But they're going to ask you about VTAC and VFib. So let's try to connect the dot. High calcium in the blood, it means low potassium. And there is no potassium affect the ECG, VTAC, and VFib. And we know potassium kills. But if we have high potassium, it kills faster. Low potassium, it kills slower. So which one kills slower, VTAC or VFib? It's VTAC. So expect the patient to have VTAC. And if you missed this information, it's in my cardiac lecture when I talk about the relationship between the VTAC and the VFib. So if we have hypocalcemia, you're going to expect the potassium goes high, thus we'll have VFib. So that's one of the samples. Last, which is calcium and magnesium, the value. It's OMG. Oh my God. O is the opposite. So opposite of magnesium. So if you expect the patients in the blood to have hypercalcium, which is calcium value of 12 or 13 or whatever number, you expect the magnesium to be low. That's why whenever we have high magnesium, we give them calcium gluconate. So hopefully this lecture really helped you out and you can try to connect the dots. I'm trying to be short, and then we can try to go from there. Others will tell me, oh, why did you put phosphorus? Do I care about phosphorus? The only thing phosphorus is helping me out is with the calcium to know if it's high or low, because it's the opposite, right? It's like pH. So if we have high phosphorus, then we have low calcium. If we have low phosphorus, we have high calcium, and that helps us only in the treatment or the medicine. So we know exactly what to give. I'm going to cover that later on, but it doesn't affect the symptoms. Like if we have high phosphorus, is there anything in the review said, oh, high phosphorus will cause tachycardia or low tachycardia? No, there's not. So that's why like you can be familiarized with it, but not memorize it. Thank you, and see you in the next lecture.